Hello and welcome to Rabboni Catholic Community. This is the 19th Sunday in Ordinary Time. And whenever this 19th Sunday comes along, I am reminded of this beautiful spiritual I used to hear back in the day. It is sung in encouragement to the parish priest when people notice that the parish priest is fielding a number of storms in his life or in the life of the parish, but it fits perfectly on this 19th Sunday, and it has become like an anthem. We look forward to singing it almost every year, at least after this reading. Jesus feeds the 5,000 and then he walks on water. And most of you will remember this. It is, preacher, will you trust in the Lord? Preacher, will you trust in the Lord? Preacher, will you trust in the Lord till you die? Preacher, will you trust in the Lord? Preacher, will you trust in the Lord? Preacher, will you trust in the Lord till you die? And the preacher, who's obviously most times the oldest person in the church, tries to get himself up and he says, "Oh, I will trust in the Lord. I will trust in the Lord. I will trust in the Lord till I die. I will trust in the Lord. I will trust in the Lord. I will trust in the Lord till I die." And the church joins us like, we will trust. Before the end of church, it is a frenzy, and we are feeling the trust that is building, asking us to trust even more or more than we have ever been asked. And so today, I want you to repeat the words of St. Peter. But not just repeat them. I want you to take these words of St. Peter to a place and a time. Maybe it's now, maybe it is in the past, where you have been asked to trust even more. And you felt yourself failing or taking in water. Have you ever said the words, "Lord, save me"? These words, "Lord, save me," are spoken by St. Peter because he feels as if his life is about to come to an end. He has run out of ideas and he's taking in water. What I find interesting about this is that St. Peter is a fisherman. What kind of a fisherman is he if he doesn't know how to tread water? But that is besides the point. He yells out, "Lord, save me." I remember saying that one time. My father was sick. And I remember getting into this charismatic prayer. And all that came out was, "Lord, save my father." Have you been there? Have you been the one to yell out maybe in desperation and say, "Lord, save my marriage. Lord, save my job." Or even more importantly, "Lord, save my sanity." Those who are raising children, I'm sure they have said that many a time. Have that at the back of your mind, and have that wonderful spiritual at the back of your mind. Let's go back and visit the first reading before we actually head towards the gospel. There are actually two lessons that we hear today, one coming from the first reading and from the gospel. From the first reading, this event happens around 9 BC. Omri is king, his son Ahab has married Jezebel, who is not an Israelite. Jezebel brings with her the worship of her gods, the gods of her ancestors. And she begins to claim that there is no God but Baal. That is her God. Elijah feels that the traditions of Israel are being put to the test here, and they are being asked to deny their God. So he says, well, let's have a theophany, a showing up of the gods. I'll set up sacrifice for my God, the God of Israel. You set up sacrifices for your God, Baal. And let us call upon our gods and see whose God responds. The God who responds is the true God. So the prophets of Baal, the finest and the brightest and the mightiest in prayer, get together and they start praying. And Elijah also sets up his sacrifice and he's taunting them and saying to them, maybe your God has fallen asleep, pray even louder. And they're praying and jumping around and cutting themselves. Their God doesn't show up. Then late at night, Elijah says, hey, how about you pour extra water on my sacrifice? Make it damp. And then I'll pray to the God of Israel. And he prayed to the God of Israel, and Yahweh shows up and shows out and burns the sacrifice. But that's not the end of the scuffle. Jezebel is so annoyed with Elijah that she seeks his life, and Elijah runs over to Mount Horeb. This is where we find him today. He is in Mount Horeb wanting to meet with God. Why, God, haven't you protected me from Jezebel? Why haven't you protected us, your people, from this invasion that Jezebel is bringing? And so Elijah is listening to the voice of God. And he hears this earthquake and thunder. He runs outside. God is not in the earthquake, in the thunder. God is not in the mighty wind. Remember, God is always in the mighty wind, the wind that separated the land and the ocean. God is not in the fire. And then there is a quiet whisper. And God is there. So what does that mean? Oftentimes, I invite the congregation to become sensitive to the promptings of the Spirit, because our God is speaking. And sometimes God speaks to us using avenues that God has not used before. This is unprecedented, that the God of Israel, who likes to show his might and power, could come to Elijah in a whisper. How is God talking to you today? Yes, we expect God to talk to us when we come to church, enter a beautiful church. We expect God to speak to us when the priest is giving the homily, but maybe God is talking somewhere else, and only you can know. Can God be speaking through the birds of the air when you're walking in nature? Can God be speaking through the lips of a child who says something remarkable? Can God be speaking to you and I when we are sitting in our dermatologist office and he or she says, don't ignore any bump on your body? God is speaking. And here's how I interpret it. I don't even think, don't stone me, I don't even think there was a whisper. Tell me, what does a whisper sound like? I think Elijah is searching for God, and God is not in all these grand expressions, and he goes out and he feels absolutely nothing. Just the breath in his nostrils and the heart beating in his body. He feels nothing. Have you ever prayed and felt nothing? Jesus did. Remember at the cross, my God, why have you abandoned me? Because he felt nothing. And God probably is asking Elijah to step out in faith and you will see me along the way. talking about stepping out in faith. St. Peter steps out in faith in the gospel. Actually, before we get to the gospel, just a couple of housekeeping things as we approach the gospel. Remember, the gospels are not newspaper articles of things that happened 2,000 years ago. These are catechetical lessons taught to the community. And so in these catechetical lessons, we know that the boat always represents the church. The ocean represents the world. There is only one who has mastered the ocean. Only God has mastered the ocean. God is the one who can tell at creation to the waters, separate from the land, and they obey. God is the one who, during the Exodus, can tell the waters, part, and they part, and there's a pathway in the middle. So only God can master the ocean. So St. Matthew has some very powerful hidden messages there, which we do not have the time to explore. But this early church, if you go back, this gospel passage is written around 90 AD. Who is the emperor? What is going on with the early church? This church is struggling. In fact, the church in Jerusalem will be exterminated. Nero is persecuting the church left, right, and center. This church has no money. This church is dwindling, and they feel like crying out and saying, "Where is God? Where is Jesus? We have been left alone." We are a church that is battling all these storms, and it feels as if we are all by ourselves. And this is when Jesus walks towards them to reassure them of his presence. But here is what preaches in the interest of time. Peter gets out, and as long as Peter has his eyes fixed on Jesus, he can do impossible things. You can do very difficult things when you are zeroed in on God, when you are zeroed in on Jesus. The moment Peter takes his eyes off the Lord, looks at his trials and tribulations, looks at the waves, somehow they become bigger than life, and he begins to sink and yells out, "Lord, save me." Do me a favor. I don't know what is going on in your life. I don't know what storm is hitting your family or your life. But concentrating on the trouble might just make it bigger. Keep your eyes on Christ. He is the answer. He is the one who saves. He is the one who does not leave us alone. Lord, save me. Immediately, Jesus reached out and held Peter's hand. May you see the hand of Jesus reaching out to you through Rabboni Catholic community or any religious or maybe even non-religious group person that reaches out to you. God bless you, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit.